Good afternoon everybody and welcome to the stream. I'm Robert from the El Magnifico Games channel, and today we're going to continue with our usual Wednesday poetry and riddles. So we'll be beginning with the Shrouding of the Duchess of Malfi, as that is the poem we finished on last week. It is a poem by John Webster, who was this gentleman, an English Jacobean dramatist best known for his tragedies The White Devil and the Duchess of Malfi. So let's get into it. Hark, now everything is still. The screech owl and the whistler shrill. Call upon our dame aloud, and bid her quickly don her shroud. Much you had of land and rent, your lengthened clays now competent. A long war disturbed your mind. Here your perfect peace is signed. Of what is fools make such vain keeping, sin their conception, their birth weeping, their life a general mist of error, their death a hideous storm of terror. Strew your hair with powder sweet, don clean linen, bathe your feet, and, the foul fiend more to check, a crucifix let bless your neck. 'Tis now full tide 'tween night and day. End your groan and come away. It is an intriguing one, isn't it? But we looked at it in some detail last week, so let's keep going. Vanitas vanitatum. Let's see if we can figure out what that says. Vanitas, a type of still life painting, symbolic of mortality. Oh, so it's a memento mori? Characteristic of Dutch painting of the 16th and 17th centuries. Sounds like it. From the Latin, emptiness, nothingness. Vanitas vanitatum, vanity of vanities. Interesting, so perhaps this is a known expression. Falsity, falsehood, deception, untruth, untrustworthiness, fickleness, vanity, vainglory. This is vanitas painting. What have we got here? The skull's a fairly obvious symbol of mortality. The sword arguably is. The candle definitely is. I have no doubt there's a great deal more symbology in there that I don't recognise. Anyway. And vanitatum. Is this just the plural? Genitive plural of vanitas. Yes, so vanitas vanitatum does appear to say vanity of vanities. All the flowers of the spring meet to perfume our burying. These have but their growing prime, and man doth flourish but his time. Survey our progress from our birth. We are set, we grow, we turn to earth. Courts of dew and all delights, all bewitching appetites. Sweetest breath and clearest eye, like perfumes go out and die, and consequently this is done, as shadows wait upon the sun. Vain the ambition of kings, who seek by trophies and dead things to leave a living name behind, and weave but nets to catch the wind. A motive, isn't it? And as it happens, I think this poem itself probably qualifies as a memento mori. I think it's think it's a iambic tetrameter with an alternate rhyme scheme. So fairly straightforward. Although interestingly, quite a lot of the initial words quite a lot of the words that begin a verse are stressed on their first syllable, which suggests a trochaic substitution. As for the meaning, I think it seems fairly self-explanatory. I'm not sure there's much to discuss. But if you have any comments, please leave them and we can discuss. So next we move on to William Alexander, Earl of Stirling. Interesting. I think I found the individual. First Earl of Stirling. And we only have one poem by him, so probably not worth going into great detail. William Alexander, 1st Earl of Stirling. Circa 1567 in Minstry, Clackmannanshire, to the 12th of February 1640, was a Scottish courtier and poet who was involved in the Scottish colonisation of Charlesfort, later Port Royal, Nova Scotia, in 1629, and Long Island, New York. His literary works include Aurora, the Monarchic Tragedies, and the Doomsday. Interesting. It is also very interesting how it seems to be a recurring theme that a lot of these poets, we don't know the exact day of their birth, but we do know the exact day of their death. That implies to me, or that raises the distinct possibility, I would suggest, that the dates of births and deaths of most people wasn't well recorded, which is a bit funny because births, marriages and deaths generally were recorded by churches, but that as these individuals gained importance, better records were taken of them, or at least more people noticed. That is to say, more was written about this individual being the passing on than was of them being born, I would suggest. Could be wrong. That may have nothing to do with it. Might simply be that later on they had better record keeping than before, but then if that were the case, you wouldn't expect this to have been a consistent theme, as far as I recall, over quite a long period. Anywho, let's get on with it, shall we? Aurora. Hold on. Oh yeah. His literary works include Aurora. So I wonder if this is just an extract from a much larger piece of work. What does Aurora mean? I'm familiar with Aurora in the context of Aurora Borealis, which is the Northern Lights. Aurora, an atmospheric phenomena created by charged particles from the sun striking the upper atmosphere. That is indeed the Northern Lights. Creating coloured lights in the sky. It is usually named Australis or Borealis based on whether it is in the southern or northern hemispheres respectively. I didn't realise that. I didn't, for example, know for certain that the same effect occurred at the South Pole. I knew that it was caused by charged particles from the sun, but of course the Earth has a magnetic pole, which I'm sure is part of the reason why it occurs at the extremities of the Earth in the first place, it must be because, I would assume it must be because the charged particles naturally get drawn there. But I didn't realise it happened at the South Pole as well. Because of course a magnetic field does have direction. And I didn't know that that's what... I hadn't heard of an aurora australis before, and I didn't know borealis was specifically identifying the northern hemisphere, but now I do. Interesting. Can we find where this is from? From Proto-Italic, that's the etymology of it getting into Latin. I assume aurora is a Latin word. Dawn, sunrise. Interesting. I wonder if that's when the aurora borealis and aurora australis actually occur at sunrise. Because if we look at this picture, for example, we can plainly see that it's either sunset or sunrise, and that would make some intuitive sense. First of all, that it would have to be at a period when it's quite dark for it to show up very well. You would assume that in the middle of the day it wouldn't show up very well, but also that it would occur just as the sun is cresting over the horizon. Although that wouldn't explain why it wouldn't occur at sunset. Unless it does, in which case it seems like calling an aurora would seem like a misnomer. Anyway, I think we've... Oh, excuse me. My apologies. I think we've looked that up enough. So aurora is actually referring to the aurora borealis in this case. If not, it might be a general reference to dawn. O happy Tython, if thou knowest thy hap, and valuest thy wealth, as I my want, then needest thou not, which I grieve to grant, repine at Jove, lulled in his lemon's lap. That golden shower in which he did repose, one dewy drop it stains, which thy aurora rains upon the rural plains, when from thy bed she passionately goes. Then, waked with the music of the merles, she not remembers Memnon when she mourns, the faithful flame which in her bosom burns, from crystal conduits froze those liquid pearls. Sad from thy sight so soon to be removed, so she her grief delates. O favoured by the fates, above the happy estates, who art of one so worthy well beloved. I can't say I fully followed that. So, who was Tython? That seems like a good starting point. Tython doesn't appear to have turned up much. Oh, Aurora mythology has though. Aurora is the Latin word for dawn. Or rather I should say Tython turned up this page about Aurora. Aurora is the Latin word for dawn and the goddess of dawn in Roman mythology and Latin poetry. Interesting, so that must be the Aurora that's being referred to. Like Greek Eos and Vigvedic Ushas, Aurora continues the name of an earlier Indo-European dawn goddess, Hausos. Aurora stems from Proto-Italic Orsos, and ultimately from Proto-Indo-European Hawaios. I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sure. The dawn, conceived as divine entity. It has cognates in the goddesses Eos, Usas, Alshrine, Useklis, and Aestra. In Roman mythology, Aurora renews herself every morning and flies across the sky, announcing the arrival of the sun. Her parentage was flexible. For Ovid, she could equally be Palantis, signifying the daughter of Pallas, or the daughter of Hyperion. Who was Hyperion? Actually, who was Pallas? In Greek mythology, Pallas was, according to Hesiod, the son of the Titan Chryseus and the Titans Chryseus and Eurybia, the brother of Astraeus and Perses, the husband of Styx, and the father of Zeus, Nike, Victory, Kratos, and Bia. Hyginus says that Pallas, whom he calls the giant, also fathered with Styx. That would be going somewhere, fathered with Styx and then someone else. Hyperion, in Greek mythology, Hyperion was one of the 12 Titan children of Gaia and Uranus. With her sister, the Titaness, Thea, Hyperion fathered Helios, Selene, and Eos. Interesting. Helios being the sun, Selene the moon. Eos I'm not so sure about. Although there is a goddess of the same name. Who apparently is cognate with this goddess Aurora. In ancient Greek mythology and religion, Eos is the personification of the dawn, who arose each morning from a home at the edge of the river Oceanus, to deliver light and dispense the night. In Greek tradition and poetry, she is characterized as a goddess dum-de-dum-de-dum. Okay, so Eos was the Greek equivalent of Aurora then. Oh, and it says here that Aurora's siblings were Sol and Luna, which are the Roman equivalents of Helios and Selene. So this is all making sense now. So where were we? She has two siblings, a brother, Sol, the sun, and a sister, Luna, the moon. Roman writers rarely imitated Hesiod and later Greek poets by naming Aurora as the mother of the Anemoi, the winds, who were the offspring of Astraeus, the father of the stars. Interesting. Aurora appears most often in sexual poetry with one of her mortal lovers. A myth taken from the Greek by Roman poets tells that one of her lovers was the Prince of Troy, Tithonus. So that's presumably Tython. Tithonus was immortal, and would therefore age and die, wanting to be with her lover for all eternity. Aurora asked Jupiter to grant immortality to Tithonus. Jupiter granted her wish, but she failed to ask for eternal youth to accompany his immortality, and he continued to age, eventually becoming forever old. Aurora turned him into a cicada. That sounds extremely familiar. I vaguely remember... I could have sworn I remember hearing something very much like that from Chinese mythology. That... I'm not sure if it was a cicada or a grasshopper, but I've got a feeling that one or the other was thought to be an individual that was exactly as described here, had been granted eternal life but not eternal youth, and then they aged and aged and aged and became, as I say, it was a grasshopper or a cicada or something like that. So that's interesting. If I'm right, then that's an interesting parallel between cultures, and probably not an accident, because as surprising as it may sound at face value, I understand that Asian and Western cultures did influence each other over a long period of time. It took time for myths and ideas to spread from west to east and east to west, but as I understand it, it did happen, which makes sense because even though, for example, the Romans were only vaguely aware of what was going on in the Far East, they didn't know China was there, for example, though they had very little accurate information on it, as I understand it, and the reason they had some information is because there were trade routes, and I don't know whether there were individuals that would have gone directly from Rome to China and back. If there were, you'd think their information would be better, or if more likely, it would have just been some people going part of the way and then other people going a little further, and by a chain of people there is a link forged between disparate cultures. That, and of course things like Alexander the Great. He never got as far as China, but he got into Asia, as I recall. You know, the occasional person that conquers a long way and forms a bit of a bridge of cultures. The Mongols also. Anyway, getting a bit off topic, aren't I? Point being, not only does that myth sound very familiar, I suspect it's not an accident. Mentions in literature and music, from Homer's Iliad. Now when dawn in robe of saffron was fasting from the streams of Okeanos, to bring light to mortals and immortals, Thetis reached the ships with the armour that the god had given her. But soon as early dawn appeared, the rosy-fingered, then gathered the folk about the pyre of the glorious Hector. Ovid's Heroides. Paris names his well-known family members, among which Aurora's lover, as follows. A Phrygian. A Phrygian was the husband of Aurora, yet she, the goddess who appoints the last road of night, carried him away. Virgil mentions in the 8th book of the Aeneid, Aurora now had left her saffron bed, and beams of early light the heavens o'erspread. Very nice. Rutilius Claudius Nemasianus mentions in his 5th century poem De Renitu Suo, Saffron Aurora had brought forward her fair weather team. The brief of shore tells us to the hall the sails yards up. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Montague says of his lovesick son Romeo, but all so soon as the all-cheering sun should in the furthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from the light steals home my heavy son. I think that's just saying that his son's creeping in late, very, very late, just before dawn. Could be wrong. In traditional Irish folk songs, such as Lord Courtown, one day I was amusing down by the Courtown banks. The sun shone bright and clearly, bold Neptune played a prank. There was Flora at the helm and Aurora to the stern, and all their gallant fine seamen their course for to steer on. In the poem Let Me Not Mar That Perfect Dream by Emily Dickinson. Let me not mar that perfect dream by an auroral stain, but so adjust my daily night that it will come again. In Our Imagination by Phyllis Wheatley. From Tithon's bed now might Aurora rise, her cheek all glowing with celestial dyes. with a pure stream of light overflows the skies. So that is this is another case of Tithonus being referred to as Tython, which, if we were in any doubt before, seems to make it clear that these are the same individual. At least, I suppose, strictly speaking, she could have had two different levels, one called Tython and one called Typhonus, but it certainly adds a great deal of support to the idea that they are in fact the same person, and that this is just a known alias. Her cheeks all glowing with celestial dyes. Interesting. Is that just a misspelling of... Well, I say misspelling. I don't know when this was written. It may be before standardized spelling of DYES. I'm not sure what they mean by celestial dyes. While a pure stream of light overflows the skies. In the poem Tithonus by Alfred Lord Tennyson, Aurora is described thus. Once more the old mysterious glimmer steals from thy pure brows, and from thy shoulder pure, and bosom beating with a heart renewed. Thy cheek begins to redden through the gloom, thy sweet eyes brighten slowly close to mine. Ere yet they blind the stars, and the wild team which love thee, yearning for thy yoke, arise, and shake the darkness from thy loosened manes, and beat the twilight into flakes of fire. In singer-songwriter Bjork's Vespertine track, Aurora is described as Vespertine. Isn't Vesper a name for sunset? Let me double check that. How about I just look up Vespertine? Poetic, over related to the evening, and that occurs in evening. From Vespertinus, evening. Okay, evening, not sunset then. Of a planet or star that sets after the sun. Or of an animal that is principally active at dusk. Okay, so yeah, it definitely doesn't appear to mean sunset, although there is clearly an association there. So as we were saying, in singer-songwriter Bjork's Vespertine track, Aurora is described as Aurora, goddess sparkle, a mountain shade suggests your shape. I tumble down on my knees, fill my mouth with snow, the way it melts, I wish to melt into you. In chapter 8 of Charlotte Bronte's Villette, Madame Beck fires her older governess first thing in the morning, and she is described by the narrator, Lucy Snow. All this, I say, was done between the moment of Madame Beck's issuing like Aurora from her chamber, and that in which she coolly sat down to pour out her first cup of coffee. The 20th century Polish poet Zbigniew Herbert wrote about Aurora's grandchildren. In his poem they are ugly, even though they will grow to be beautiful. Kwestia smaku. The first and strongest of the 50 spacer worlds in the Caves of Steel and subsequent novels by Isaac Asimov is named after the goddess Aurora. Its capital is Eos. Well, there you go. So now we are quite clear on who Aurora was supposed to be and who Tython is. So let's give this a second reading, shall we? O happy Tython, if thou knowest thy hap, and valuest thy wealth, as I my want, then needest thou not, which I grieve to grant, repine at Jove, lulled in his lemon's lap. That golden shower on which she did repose, when dewy droplet stains, which thy Aurora rains upon the rural plains, when from thy bed she passionately goes. Then, waked with the music of the merles, she not remembers Memnon when she mourns, that faithful flame which in her bosom burns, from crystal conduits froze those liquid pearls. Sad from thy sight so soon to be removed, she so her grief dilates. O favoured by the fates, above the happy estates, who art of one so worthy, well beloved. Interesting. I'm still not following it all, but I'm certainly getting a sense of romance and a sense of mortality. Let's look up a few more words, shall we? Le Man. From Old English, Leofman. Lover, sweetheart. Attested as personal name. Okay, one beloved. A lover, a sweetheart of either sex, especially a secret lover, gallant or mistress. Ooh, is gallant considered to be the equivalent of mistress? Because mistress, strictly speaking, is the female counterpart of master. Hence you might refer to the master of the house, the mistress of the house. But it has come to also mean, obviously, a female lover. Now, I assume that was meant in a jocular sense originally. That if they referred to a man's mistress, they were suggesting that his lover held a great deal of control over him. So it's reasonable to assume that that the appropriate term for a male lover like that would not be a master. So I wonder if it is in fact gallant. Brave, valiant, honourable, grand, noble, obsolete, showy, splendid, magnificent, gay, well dressed. Clearly not that. Polite and attentive to ladies, courteous to women, chivalrous, getting closer. Dated, a fashionable young man who is polite and attentive to women. One who woos, a lover, a suitor, a seducer. Yes. Okay. So I don't know if it's as well attested as mistress, but it certainly does have that meaning. Often negative, a paramour. It's not a paramour one that you're obsessed with in a romantic sense. An illicit lover, either male or female. Oh, okay. So it doesn't refer to the magnitude of one's affection, but rather to its illicit nature. Interesting. Where does paramour come from? Par amour, for love's sake. Interesting. So that's what Le Man is. Repine at Jove, lulled in his Le Man's lap. So let me start again. O happy Tython, if thou knowest thy hap, I assume that's short for happenstance, so one situation, but let's verify that. That which happens, an occurrence or happening, especially an unexpected, random, chance or fortuitous event, chance, fortune, luck. Oh, so it doesn't come from happenstance. To happen, to befall, to chance. Oh, that's the verb sense. Interesting. So, if thou knowest thy hap, and valuest thy wealth, as I my want, then needest thou not repine at Jove, lulled in his Le Man's lap. thought repine was to relax and to lie. Repine is to fail, to wane, to complain, to regret. Oh! Okay, I was a long way off then. What was I thinking of? I don't know. I was thinking of recline, wasn't I? How embarrassing. Okay, so repine is to wane or to regret. Okay, repine at Jove, so regret at Jove, lulled in his leman's lap. Nope. Nope, I'm not following that. In his leman's lap, so his lover's lap. Lulled. Surely lulled would mean relaxed, but in a induced to be relaxed, but generally in a negative sense. So, for example, causing someone to be calm and relaxed in a situation when they're actually in danger. A period of rest or soothing, a period of reduced activity, a respite, a period without waves or wind, an extended pause between sets of waves. To cause to rest by soothing influences, to compose, to calm, to gradually come, to subside, to cease or abate. Okay, so nothing here about it being negative. I suppose I was probably confused by expressions like lull into a full sense of security. Although it's worth pointing out that if lull had the meaning that I thought it had, then that would make that expression redundant. So yes, that makes sense. So this is just to be soothed then. Repine at Jove, so regret at Jove, lulled in his leman's lap, so soothed in his lover's lap. I'm not following. Let's try once more. O happy Tithon, if thou knowest thy hap, and valuest thy wealth as I my want, then needest thou not, which hour I grieve to grant, repine at Jove, lulled in his leman's lap. That only really makes sense if Aurora was considered to be a lover of Jupiter, but that's not what we found. That golden shower in which he did repose. Repose, rest, sleep. Quietness, ease, peace, calmness. I wonder if in my head I somehow combined repose and recline and created repine. That would make sense as to how I got confused. Okay, that golden shower in which he did repose, when dewy drop its stains, which thy Aurora rains upon the rural plains, when from thy bed she passionately goes. There is some very powerful imagery here of her leaving his bed and dewy drops falling upon the plains. The idea, of course, is being a morning rain. But I feel like I'm missing some of the nuance here. Then, waked with the music of the merles. Okay, what's a merle? The Eurasian blackbird. Any blackbird. Okay. That's probably from a mythological figure, I would guess. Might not be. Merle is apparently a given name used by both men and women. I didn't know that. Not seeing a reference to mythology though. So it probably just means a blackbird. Tell you what. Why don't I check in my physical dictionary? That's, I would have thought, more likely to pick up on any mythological association. Merle. Archaic, Scottish, blackbird. Huh. Then, waked with the music of the merles, she not remembers Memnon when she mourns. Okay, that's our next one. Who is Memnon? Is that Agamemnon? Or someone completely different? In Greek mythology, Memnon, resolute, was a king of Ethiopia and son of Tithonus and Eos. Ooh. As a warrior, he was considered to be almost Achilles' equal in skill. During the Trojan War, he brought an army to Troy's defence and killed Antilochus, Nestor's son, during a fierce battle. Nestor challenged Memnon to a fight, but Memnon refused, being there was little honour in killing the aged man. Nestor then pleaded with Achilles to avenge his son's death. Despite warnings that soon after Memnon fell, so too would Achilles, the two men fought. Memnon drew blood from Achilles, but Achilles drove his spear through Memnon's chest, sending the Ethiopian army running. The death of Memnon echoes that of Hector, another defender of Troy, whom Achilles also killed out of revenge for a fallen comrade, Patroclus. I remember reading about that when I read the Iliad. For whatever reason, I don't recall Memnon. After Memnon's death, Zeus was moved by Eos's tears and granted him immortality. Memnon's death is related at length in the lost epic Aethiopis, composed after the Iliad, circa the 7th century BCE. Quintus of Smyrna records Memnon's death in post-Homerica. His death is also described in Philostratus' Imagines. Or is that Imagines? Not sure. Dictys Cretensis, author of a pseudo-chronicle of the Trojan War, writes that Memnon, the son of Tithonus and Aurora, arrived with a large army of Indians and Ethiopians. A truly remarkable army which consisted of thousands and thousands of men with various kinds of arms, and surpassed the hopes and prayers even of Priam. So, let's go back. Then, wakened with the music of the merles, she not remembers Memnon when she mourns. That faithful flame which in her bosom burns, from crystal conduits froze those liquid pearls. I assume the crystal conduits froze those liquid pearls as a reference to her tear ducts and her crying, but I could be wrong. Sad from thy sight so soon to be removed, she so her grief dilates. O favoured by the fates, above the happiest states, who art of one so worthy, well beloved. So, I'm getting more of these references now, but a lot of this still remains a mystery. I do take it up. There isn't a entry on the poem. No. I may be out of luck here. Goodness me, this is a very... the word aurora is very heavily used, isn't it? Nope. No entry for this particular poem, so I can't look it up for additional information. What I would say is I enjoyed it. I think there is probably quite a bit that I'm missing. But it does have some very interesting imagery, and the mythology that surrounds it is interesting. Let's keep going. Phineas Fletcher. Oh, I also note that it has an irregular form, which is interesting. Anyway, where were we? Tell you what, it would help if I looked up Phineas Fletcher on Wikipedia, not Wiktionary. And how many entries do we have for Phineas Fletcher? Just one. So again, not much point in going into a great amount of detail. Phineas Fletcher, the 8th of April 1582 to the 13th of December 1650, was an English poet, elder son of Dr. Giles Fletcher and brother of Giles the Younger, who was born at Cranbrook, Kent, and was baptised on the 8th of April 1582. That's interesting. I might just be wrong, but I didn't think it was customary to baptize a child on the day of its birth. I mean, I suppose from the point of view of its immortal soul, you would want to baptize it as soon as practically possible, especially in an age when child mortality was so high. But on the other hand, you'd assume that the mother would require at least some time to recover. I mean, I know women that have just given birth have an astounding recovery ability. As I understand it, it's even a general recovery ability, as in, it's not just the trauma that their body's been through specifically that they're very, very quick to recover from, but I believe that due to various changes in their body, they can recover from all sorts of injury very quickly at that point, which makes sense, because when humans were still evolving, it wouldn't have been very practical if women had been completely out of action for weeks at a time after giving birth or something like that. That could be a major problem, especially given that early human beings would have likely been nomadic. So my point being is that although women that have given birth tend to be able to recover much more quickly than you would generally think, my understanding is that they'd still need some time to recover, and of course baptism is something of a public ceremony, as I understand it. Or is it a private ceremony? I know weddings are public, notionally, at least as far as the church is concerned. But I suppose that makes sense, because with a wedding you need to... Historically with weddings you would need people to be able to come in from the public, or members of the public to come in and potentially object to a wedding on, grounds of bigamy or that type of thing. That therefore making weddings public served a very important public function. So I suppose baptisms may have been a private function, but even so, you'd expect the family to be there. So yeah, I'm surprised that he was supposedly baptised on the same day as his birth, even though I don't really know much about it. I wonder if that's just the earliest date they have for him. If they don't have the date of his birth, but they have the date of his christening, and they just assumed, well, it would be within a few days anyway, so that's the best we can do. Anywho, I have spent far too much time rambling on about that and not enough time looking at the poetry. So this is called a litany. Now what is a litany? Isn't that like a body of religious texts? From the ancient Greek, litaniae? I'm not sure. That I doubt that's pronounced that way, but I'm not sure how it would be pronounced. Prayer. A ritual liturgical prayer in which a series of prayers recited by a leader are alternated with responses from the congregation, or a prolonged or tedious list. Interesting. I'm going to cross-reference that with what my physical dictionary says. Because I thought litany referred to a body of work, not a specific work. And it would make a lot of sense if litany meant, at least to me it would make a lot of sense if litany actually referred to a body of prayers that have been approved by a religious body, as opposed to an individual prayer. Litany. A series of petitions for use in church services or processions recited by clergy and responded to, usually in repeated formulas, by people. The litany, that contained in the Book of Common Prayer. Litany desk, litany stool, or which reciter of litany kneels. Okay. I wonder if then litany originally just meant prayer, then it came to mean prayers specifically within the Book of Common Prayer, or possibly it's possible that at a time earlier than that, well, between those two periods, it came to just mean an official prayer, if you will. Then a prayer from the Book of Common Prayer, and then the litany came to mean the body of prayers within the Book of Common Prayer, and a litany retained the meaning of just a particular prayer from said book. That's guesswork on my part, but it would make sense. Also interesting how it seems to indicate a kind of call and response structure. So I wonder if we'll see that in this poem. So where were we? Phineas Fletcher. A litany. Drop, drop, slow tears, and bathe those beauteous feet, which brought from heaven the news and Prince of Peace. Cease not, wet eyes, his mercy to entreat, to cry for vengeance, sin doth never cease. In your deep floods, drown all my faults and fears, nor let his eye see sin, but through my tears. Interesting. No call and response, but it does sound like this poem is something of a plea in and of itself. Nor let his eye see sin, but through my tears. Interesting. Interesting grammar as well. That does look like a full stop there, and then they begin with a lowercase letter. The only other way that would make sense is if this was an abbreviation, but I don't think it is. So, that's very interesting use of language. I mean, I think what it's suggesting is don't let God see my sins except in so much as he sees my except in that he sees my great regret of said sins. So don't let them be seen in and of themselves, but only through my regret. I do wonder what these references to the bathing of feet are, though. I feel like that must be a biblical reference. I had been reading through some of the Old Testament recently, although I had not gotten very far at all because it is large. And there were a lot of references there to washing one's feet when travelling. But I think that's because it was a very arid and dirty region. And so you would tend to get a lot of dust accumulating in about one's person, especially if one were walking on the road. And so that seems like more of a just a custom of the time. That, you know, if you were to stop somewhere for the night, that, you know, obviously they will offer you, basic hospitality would demand that they offer you water specifically to wash your feet with. I have a vague memory of Jesus washing the feet of some paupers, although I know nothing more about it than what I've just said. And bathe those beauteous feet, which brought from heaven the news and Prince of Peace. I assume it was an angel that announced Jesus is coming, though. Probably Gabriel. Didn't Gabriel announce to Mary that she was pregnant with God's son or something like that? Cease not, wet eyes, his mercy to entreat, to cry for vengeance, sin doth never cease. In your deep floods drown all my faults and fears, nor let his eye see sin but through my tears. I do feel I'm missing some essential context to this. Could it be a reference to an angel crying? Okay, so the wet eyes are entreating mercy from God. That makes sense in a very poetic way. That God would see an individual crying, possibly an angel, we're hypothesizing. They're crying due to sin that they have witnessed, and that brings forth a sense of mercy. It invokes the emotion of mercy. To cry for vengeance, sin doth never cease. In your deep floods drown all my faults and fears. So, in your deep flood, so that's a flood of tears. So again, perhaps this is supposed to be imagery of being washed in angels' tears. And that process granting you perfection, or at least something close to. Nor let his eye see sin but through my tears. See, now it's clearly referring to the speaker's tears as opposed to some other entity's tears. But that only makes sense if it's the angel speaking, which I clearly can't be the case. Yeah, can't quite make sense of this. What do we have going on here structurally? Drop, drop, slow tears. Well, that's just 2 feet. And it doesn't even have a clear meter, does it? And bathe those beauteous feet. And bathe those beauteous feet. That's iambic, and that's 3 feet, which brought from heaven that's 2 feet, and it's iambic again. The news and Prince of Peace, 3 iambic, sees not what eyes, his mercy to entreat, same thing in both cases, to cry for vengeance. Sin doth never cease. Sin doth never cease. Right, that's trochaic, not iambic. Yes, because it's definitely never, not never. So we don't have a trochaic substitution there. In your deep floods, your deep floods, drown all my faults and fears, nor let his eye see sin but through my tears. Yeah, there is a tendency here for it to be 2 syllables, 3 syllables, not syllables, sorry, wrong word entirely, feet. 2 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet. But the actual meter seems irregular and I can't quite figure out why. Anything else to be said about it? Tears, fears, rhyme. Cease and peace. Oh, we have tears up the top as well. Feet entreat. That's interesting. So there's quite a lot of rhyming here. But it doesn't seem to follow any clear structure. In a few cases there's a rhyme 3 verses later. So feet, 1, 2, 3, then entreat. So I suppose that's 4 lines later. So with 3 verses intervening. Same with peace and cease, but other than that, so yeah, it's surprisingly irregular. Anywho, let's keep going. Sir John Beaumont. Who was this individual then? Sir John Beaumont, 1st Baronet. Sir John Beaumont, 1st Baronet of Gracestew in the parish of Belton in Leicestershire, England, was a poet best known for his work, Bosworth Field, a poem about the Battle of Bosworth Field. The poem we have for him is entitled Of His Dear Son, Gervase. Again, as we only have one poem here, it's not worth going into a great deal of detail. Dear Lord, receive my son, whose winning love to me was like a friendship far above the course of nature or his tender age, whose looks could all my bitter griefs assuage. Let his pure soul, ordained 7 years to be in that frail body which was part of me, remain my pledge in heaven, a sent to show how to this porter every step I go. Marriage and children. Beaumont lived in Leicestershire for many years as a bachelor before eventually marrying Elizabeth Fortescue. Died after the 16th of April 1652, daughter of John Fortescue and paternal granddaughter of one of the only two married daughters of Sir Geoffrey Pole and Constance Pakenham. By his wife he had 4 sons, including Sir John Beaumont, 2nd Baronet, eldest son and heir. Killed at the Siege of Gloucestershire, he was considered one of the most athletic men of his time. He published some of his father's poems and wrote an enthusiastic elegy on him. And Gervase Beaumont, who died in childhood. The circumstances of his death are recorded in one of his father's most touching poems. That'll be this one, I should imagine. I thought it had the ring of being based in personal experience. Dear Lord, receive my son, whose winning love to me was like a friendship far above the course of nature or his tender age, whose looks could all my bitter griefs assuage. Let his pure soul, ordained 7 years to be in that frail body which was part of me, remain my pledge in heaven, a sent to show how to this porter every step I go. Doesn't actually tell us about the circumstances of his death, though. There's just a reference to a frail body, which might indicate illness. But it certainly is touching. William Drummond of Hawthornden. William Drummond, called of Hawthornden, was a Scottish poet. Do we have many of his poems? We have at least 2. We have quite a few. Okay. So it probably is worth taking the time to actually read more about his life, I would suggest. Drummond was born at Hawthornden Castle, Midlothian, to John Drummond, the first Laird of Hawthornden, and Susanna Fowler, sister of the poet and courtier William Fowler, and daughter of Janet Fockart. Sir Robert Drummond of Carnock, one time Master of Work to the Crown of Scotland, was his grandfather. Yes, so he would have... Oh, goodness me. I was just thinking, when would he have been alive? Would that have been... to what degree did that overlap with the union of the English and Scottish crowns? And the answer to that is he would have been born during... He's Scottish, of course. He would have been born during the reign of Elizabeth I on the English throne. I suspect King James VI of Scotland was probably on the throne when he was born. I don't know the exact dates, but I know that he had been ruling a while when Queen Elizabeth died. And then when he would have been in his mid-teens, James would have inherited the English throne. But before his death, Drummond would have seen the execution of Charles I. When I say seen, I mean was alive during the period of that taking place. Yes, he would have just about seen the execution. So that would have been at the end of the Civil War. Yes, I thought so. The Civil War did actually go on slightly longer than that. So he would have died during the Civil War, presumably after King Charles I had been beheaded. Anyway, let me carry on. Drummond received his early education at the Royal High School of Edinburgh and graduated in July 1605 as M.A. of the recently founded University of Edinburgh. His father was a gentleman usher at the English court, as he had been at the Scottish court from 1590, and William, in a visit to London in 1606, describes the festivities in connection with the visit of King Christian IV of Denmark. Drummond spent 2 years at Bourges and Paris in the study of law. I have no idea if that's actually how it's pronounced. And in 1609 he was again in Scotland, where by the death of his father in the following year he became Laird of Hawthornden at the early age of 24. The list of books he read up to this time is preserved in his own handwriting. It indicates a strong preference for imaginative literature and shows that he was keenly interested in contemporary verse. His collection, now in the library of the University of Edinburgh, contains many first editions of the most famous productions of the age. And finding himself his own master, Drummond naturally abandoned law for the muses. For, says his biographer in 1711, the delicacy of his wit always run on the pleasantness and usefulness of history, and on the fame and softness of poetry. In 1612 began his correspondence with Sir William Alexander of Menstrie, afterwards Earl of Stirling, which ripened into a lifelong friendship after Drummond's visit to Menstrie in 1614. Drummond's first publication appeared in 1613, an elegy on the death of Henry, Prince of Wales, called Tears on the Death of Meliads. The poem shows the influence of Spenser's and Sidney's pastoralism. In the same year he published an anthology of the elegies of Chapman, Wither and others entitled Mausoleum, or the choicest flowers of the epitaphs. In 1616, the year of Shakespeare's death, appeared Poems Amorous, Funeral, Divine, Pastoral, in sonnets, songs, sextains, madrigals, which for several centuries was thought to commemorate Drummond's love for a fiancée who died young, a certain Cunningham of Barnes, but the story is now considered unlikely, considering that Cunningham died in July 1616 and that Drummond omitted any reference to her when he compiled a list of important dates in his life many years later. The poem bears marks of a close study of Sidney and of the Italian poets. He sometimes translates direct from the Italian, especially from Giambattista Marino. For feasting, a panegyric to the King's most excellent majesty, a poem written in heroic couplets of remarkable facility, celebrates James's visit to Scotland in that year. In 1618, Drummond began a correspondence with Michael Drayton. The two poets continued to write at intervals for 13 years. The latter began in the year of The last letter being dated in the year of Drayton's death. The latter had almost been persuaded by his dear Drummond to print the later books of Polly Albion at Hart's Edinburgh Press. In the winter of 1618 to 1619, Drummond had included Ben Jonson in his circle of literary friends, and at Christmas 1618 was honoured with a visit of a fortnight or more from the dramatist. Which one was Michael Drayton? Was an English poet who came to prominence in the Elizabethan era, continuing to write through the reign of James I and into the reigns of Charles I. Many of his works consisted of historical poetry. I can only imagine that we've read some of his work. Allow me to check quickly. Michael Drayton, indeed. It was a while ago, though. To His Coy Love, The Parting, Sirena, Agincourt. The account of their conversations, long supposed to be lost, was discovered in the Advocates' Library, Edinburgh, by David Lane, and was edited for the Shakespeare Society in 1842 and printed by Guilford and Cunningham. The conversations are full of literary gossip, and embody Johnson's opinion of himself and of his host, whom he frankly told that his verses were too much for the schools, and were not after the fancy of the time, and again that he was too good and simple, and that oft a man's modesty made a fool of his wit. But the publication of what was obviously intended as a private journal has given Johnson an undeserved reputation for very harsh literary judgments, and has cast blame on Drummond for blackening his guest's memory. In 1623 appeared the poet's fourth publication, entitled Flowers of Sion, by William Drummond of Hawthornden, to which is adjoined his Cypress Grove. From 1625 till 1630, Drummond was probably, for the most part, engaged in travelling on the continent. On the 23rd of September 1626, he received 16 patents for diverse devices, mainly military. These included glasses of Archimedes, which could set ships afire at sea, and an early form of machine gun, in which a number of musket barrels are fastened together in such a manner as to allow one man to take the place of 100 musketeers in battle. Why does this sound unlikely? However, there is no evidence that he actually produced any of these devices. In 1627, however, he seems to have been home for a short time, as in that year he appears in the entirely new character of the holder of a patent for the construction of military machines entitled Litteria Magistri Guelmi Drummond de Fabrica Machinarium Militarium Anno 1627. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but it does sound unlikely, and suitably off topic that I don't intend to research it further. Not right now, anyway. In 1630, Drummond again began to reside permanently at Hawthornden, and in 1622 he married Elizabeth Logan, by whom he had 5 sons and 4 daughters. In 1633, Charles made his coronation visit to Scotland. What do you mean his coronation visit? Oh, Charles I, of course. And Drummond's pen was employed in writing congratulatory speeches and verses. He was involved in organising the King's triumphal procession through Edinburgh. As Drummond preferred High Church Episcopalianism to Presbyterianism and was an extremely loyal subject, he supported King Charles's policy of spreading Laudianism, though he protested against some of the methods employed to enforce it. When Lord Balmerino was put on trial for the capital offence of retaining in his possession a petition regarded as a libel against the king, Drummond, in an energetic letter, 1635, was urged the injustice and folly of the proceedings. About this time, a claim by the Earl of Menteith to the earldom of Stratton, which was based on the assertion that King Robert III, husband of Annabella Drummond, was illegitimate, roused the poet's pride of blood and prompted him to prepare an historical defence of his house. Robert III, born Judgeship, was King of Scots, husband of Annabella Drummond. Oh, I see. So someone from his family had, a couple of 100 years before, or possibly slightly more, married the king, and there was a suggestion that she may have had an illegitimate child. No, that's not right. No, that someone from his family, Annabella Drummond, married the King Robert III of Scotland, and King Robert III of Scotland was accused of being illegitimate, I think. About this time, a claim by the Earl of Menteith to the earldom of Stratton, which was based on the assertion that King Robert III, husband of Annabella Drummond, was illegitimate, roused the poet's pride of blood and prompted him to prepare an historic defence of his house. Interesting. I feel like there's more detail there that's been skipped over, because I don't see how marrying an illegitimate child would necessarily bring dishonour on you, if you weren't to know. But perhaps there's perhaps there's aspects there that I don't understand. Partly to please his kinsman, the Earl of Perth, and partly to satisfy his own curiosity, the poet made researches in the genealogy of the family. This investigation was the real secret of Drummond's interest in Scottish history, so we find that he now began his history of Scotland during the reigns of the five Jameses, a work which did not appear till 1655 and is remarkable only for its good literary style. His next work was called forth by the king's enforced submission to the opposition of his Scottish subjects. It is entitled Irene, or a remonstrance for concord, amity, and love amongst his majesty's subjects, and embodies Drummond's political creed of submission to authority as the only logical refuge from democracy, which he hated. In 1639, Drummond grudgingly signed the Covenant solely for self-protection, but was uneasy under the burden, as several political squibs by him testify. In 1643, he published something written in Greek that I can't read, or a defence of a petition tendered to the Lords of the Council of Scotland by certain noblemen and gentlemen, a political pamphlet in the support of cavaliers in Scotland who wished to defend the king's cause against the Rump Parliament. Its burden is an invective against the intolerance of the then dominant Presbyterian ministers. His later works may be described briefly as royalist pamphlets, written with more or less caution as the times required. Drummond took the part of Montrose, and a letter from the royalist leader in 1646 acknowledged his services. He also wrote a pamphlet, A Vindication of the Hamiltons, supporting the claims of the Duke of Hamilton to lead the Scottish army, which was to release Charles I. It is said that Drummond's health received a severe shock when news was brought of the king's execution. He died on the 4th of December 1649. He was buried in a stone vault in his parish church of Laswade, or Laswade. Not sure. His tomb was restored in the 1880s and a bronze relief added over the entrance. Public memorials. Drummond is one of the 16 poets and writers whose heads appear on the Scott Monument on the Princes Street in Edinburgh. He appears on the far right side of the north face. Works. Drummond's most important works are the Cypress Grove and the poems. The Cypress Grove exhibits great wealth of illustration and extraordinary command of musical English. It is an essay on the folly of the fear of death. This globe of the earth, says he, which seemeth huge to us, in respect of the universe, and compared with that wide pavilion of heaven, is less than little, of no sensible quantity, and but as a point. That is not just an accurate point, but shows profound insight. This is one of Drummond's favourite moods, and he uses constantly in his poems such phrases as the all, this great all. Even in such of his poems as may be called more distinctively Christian, this philosophic conception is at work. I wonder what they mean by one of his favourite moods. Do they mean that in a... Do they mean that in a nebulous everyday sense? As in, you know, just a general vibe, if you will? To use a... some modern slang. Or is there something more specific they're getting at? Let me quickly check my physical dictionary. So what do we have? Mood, state of mind or feeling. In the mood, in no mood. Inclined, disinclined. For thing to do. Mood, grammar, any of the groups or forms in conjunction or verb that serve to indicate its function, as indicative, imperative, subjunctive. Mood. Music equals mode. Logic, any of the classes into which each of the figures of valid categorical syllogism is subdivided. Mood. Oh, sorry, moody. So then we move on from there. Yeah, so no specific poetic sense. I would guess then, like I say, it's more of just a general statement of the, if you will, vibe. A noteworthy feature in Drummond's poetry, as in that of his courtier contemporaries Iton, Lord Stirling and others, is that it manifests no characteristic Scottish element, but owes its birth and inspiration rather to the English and Italian masters. Drummond was essentially a follower of Spenser, but, amid all his sensuousness, and even in those lines most conspicuously beautiful, there is a dash of melancholy thoughtfulness. Drummond was called the Scottish Petrarch, and his sonnets, which are the expression of a genuine passion, stand far above most of the contemporary Petrarchan imitations. A remarkable burlesque poem, Polemo Medinia inter Vitavum et Neburnum, printed anonymously in 1684, has been persistently and with good reason ascribed to him. It is a mock heroic tale in macaronic Latin. Dog Latin or Cod Latin is a phrase or jargon that imitates Latin, often by translating English words into Latin, by conjugating or declining them as if they were Latin words. Enriched with Scottish Gaelic expressions of a country fugue on the fife lands of his old friends the Cunninghams. English composer Gerald Finzi's 3 short elegies, Opus 5, consists of musical settings for unaccompanied chorus of 3 of Drummond's poems. Life a right shadow is, the world a hunting is, and this life which seems so fair. Anywho, I think that seems quite an exhaustive description of him and his works. So, the first of his poems we're looking at is entitled Invocation. Hold on, Phobos Arise. Which one was Phobos? Phobos is one of the moons of Mars, if I recall correctly. But what else is it? Oh, Apollo. Apollo's chief epithet was Phobos, literally bright. It was very commonly used by both the Greeks and Romans for Apollo's role as the god of light. Like other Greek deities, he had a number of others applied to him, reflecting the variety of roles, duties, and aspects ascribed to the god. However, while Apollo has a great number of appellations in Greek myth, only a few occur in Latin literature. Oh, maybe it isn't one of the moons of Mars. What was I thinking of then? I know this is slightly off topic, but this will just bother me if I don't look it up. Oh, Phobos. Okay. I wonder, am I pronouncing this one wrong then? Should it be Phoebus? Or something like that, perhaps? I think that's Phoebus. Let me double check. C. Phoebus. It is Phoebus. Okay. Phoebus arise. So that's how the poem begins. Phoebus arise and paint the sable skies with azure, white and red. Rouse Memnon's mother from her Tithon's bed, that she thy career may with roses spread. The nightingales thy coming each west sing, make an eternal spring. Give life to this dark world which lieth dead. Spread forth thy golden hair, in larger locks than thou wast wont before, an emperor-like decor, with diadem of pearl thy temples fair. Chase hence the ugly night, which serves but to make dear thy glorious light. This is that happy morn, that day, long wished day, of all my life so dark, if cruel stars have not my ruin sworn, and fates not hope betray, which only white deserves, a diamond for every should it mark. This is the morn should bring into this grove, my love to hear and recompense love. Fair king, who all preserves, but show thy blushing beams, and thou to sweeter eyes shalt see than those which by Peneus streams did once thy heart surprise. Nay, suns which shine as clear as thou whento thou did to Rome appear. Now, Flora, deck thyself in fairest guise, if that ye winds would hear a voice surpassing far Amphion's lyre. Your stormy chiding stay, let Zephyr only breathe, and with her tresses play, kissing sometimes these purple ports of death. The winds all silent are, and Phoebus in his chair, ensaffroning sea and air, make vanish every star. Night like a drunkard reels beyond the hills to shun his flaming wheels. The fields with flowers are decked in every hue, the clouds bespangled with bright gold their blue. Here is the pleasant place, and everything save her who all should grace. Goodness. Seems reasonably irregular in terms of rhythm. I don't recognise it as any poetic form I know of. Also irregular in terms of rhyme. We have a rise in skies, which is just alternate rhyming. Then we have red, bed and spread, so we have 3. Then we have sing and spring, 2. Dead, which I don't think... Oh, that one rhymes back with spread before. Then we have hair, which will rhyme with fair. Before decor. Okay, so we have 2 examples of an ABBA rhyming scheme. Night light, so now it's alternate again. Morn sworn, day... Morn and sworn, but day and dark don't rhyme. Day and betray do. Dark and mark do. So yeah, it seems a bit all over the place. I mean, you must admit, it does have a nice sound to it. Yet it doesn't have a simple structure. I might stop there for now. I know it's a little early. But this one seems like it's quite a... Now I'll tell you what we should do. We should actually take the time to properly study this one now. And then we'll stop there and move on to the riddles. So, Phoebus arise and paint the sable skies. Sable, I believe, isn't that a dark blonde? Or is it a brown? A small carnivorous mammal of the old world that resembles a weasel. Oh, I see. A dark brown colour resembling the fur of some sables. Okay, it's dark brown. I was quite a ways off with dark blonde. With azure, white and red. Rouse Memnon's mother from her Tithon's bed, that she thy career may with roses spread. The nightingales, thy coming each... Well, perhaps I should go back and just say, well, that makes sense, because she's the god of the dawn. As we established before. Aurora. And Apollo was the god of light, particularly in his Phoebus epithet. So this all makes sense. That she, thy career may with roses spread, is obviously just a very poetic way of suggesting that, you know, you'll be a lot more successful with her help. The nightingales, they... Wait, hold on. Yes, that does make sense. The nightingales are coming each where sing. Eachwhere. Eachwhere. Is that equivalent to everywhere? As in each place? Eachwhere. Obsolete everywhere. Yes. Make an eternal spring. Give life to the dark world which Lilith dead. Lief dead. Lief dead. Oh, of course it is. Give life to this dark world which lieth dead. Spread forth thy golden hair in larger locks than thou wast wont before. I think that was want before. As in, as thou tended to do before, or had an inclination to do before. An emperor-like decor, with diadem of pearl, thy temples fair. Chase hence the ugly night, which serves but to make thy glorious light. This is that happy morn, that day, long-wished day, of all my life so dark, if cruel stars have not my ruin sworn, and fate's not hope betray. Which only white deserves, a diamond for ever should it mark. This is the morn should bring into this grove, my love to hear and recompense my love. So, recompense my love, presumably means to repay me for my love. Which follows on from this is the morn should bring into this grove, my love. So it sounds like this is a poem about meeting your beloved for the first time. Could be wrong. Although the implication seems to be that this is a fated meeting, as opposed to one which is entirely as opposed to one that is entirely incidental and by chance. Fair king, who all preserves, but show thy blushing beams, and thou to sweeter eyes shalt see than those which by Peneus streams. Right, here's Peneus. In Greek mythology, Peneus was a Thessalian river god, one of the 3,000 rivers, Pontamoi, a child of Oceanus and Tethys. The nymph Crasus bore him one son, Hopsius, who was king of the Lapiths, and 3 daughters, Menip, mother of Phrastor by Pelagus, Daphne, and Stilbe. Oh, is that the Daphne that was transformed? Is a naiad. Associated with fountains, wells, springs, streams, brooks, and other bodies of fresh water. Was I thinking of a different one? Chased by Apollo against a whale, invoked the river god who transformed her into a laurel tree. Hence the association between Laurels and Apollo. Thenceforth, Apollo developed a special reverence for the laurel. At the Pythian Games, which were held every 4 years in Delphi in honour of Apollo, a wreath of laurel gathered from the Vale of Tempe in Thessaly was given as a prize. Hence it later became customary to award prizes in the form of laurel wreaths to victorious generals, athletes, poets and musicians, worn as a chaplet on the head. The poet laureate is a well-known modern example of such a prize winner, dating from the early Renaissance in Italy. According to Pausanias, the reason for this was simply and solely because the prevailing tradition has it that Apollo fell in love with the daughter of Ladon, Daphne. Right, well, Ladon wasn't the father according to what we just read. Or mother. I'm guessing Ladon's a male name, but I don't know. Most artistic depictions of the myth focus on the moment of Daphne's transformation. Where were we? Daphne and Stilbe. Some sources state that he was father of Cyrene, alternately known as his granddaughter through Hypsius. Daphne, in an Arcadian version of the myth, was instead the daughter of the river god Ladon. So that explains that discrepancy. Peneus also had a son Atrax with Bura and Adrius with an unknown consort. Tricke or Tricker, eponym of the city Tricca, was mentioned as his daughter. In later accounts, Peneus was credited to be the father of Chrysogenia, who consorted with Zeus and became the mother of Theseus. Meanwhile, his daughter Astabe coupled with Hermes and became the parent of Astacus, father of Iocles, father of Hipponus. According to Hellanicus, Peneus was the father of Iphis, mother of Simonius, by Aeolus, the son of Helen. Mythology. Eros shot Apollo with one of his arrows, causing him to fall in love with Daphne. It was Eros' plan that Daphne would scorn Apollo because Eros was angry that Apollo had made fun of his archery skills. Eros also claimed to be irritated by Apollo's singing. Daphne prayed to the river god Peneus to help her. He changed her into a laurel tree, which later became sacred to Apollo. Wait, so she prayed to her father? Yes, invoked a river god father. Right, so that's why Peneus is famous, for transforming his daughter into a laurel tree. As you do. So where were we? And thou shalt see to sweeter eyes. And thou to sweeter eyes shalt see than those which by Peneus' streams did once thy heart surprise. Let me go back. Fair king, who all preserves, but show thy blushing beams, and thou to sweeter eyes shalt see than those which by Peneus' streams did once thy heart surprise. Oh, so this is addressed to Apollo, and it's calling him the fair king and suggesting that he will see to sweeter eyes than those that surprised him by Peneus' stream, that is, Daphne. Nay, suns which shine as clear as thou when too thou did to Rome appear. As thou when too thou did to appear, to Rome appear. That's another reference to something I don't know about. Apollo appearing before Rome. But there were, what, 2 of him? Or he was 2 years old? Let's see, shall we? The Roman worship of Apollo was adopted from the Greeks. As a quintessentially Greek god, Apollo had no direct Roman equivalent, although later Roman poets often referred to him as Phoebus. There was a tradition that the Delphic oracle was consulted as early as the period of the kings of Rome during the reign of Tarquinius Superbus. On the occasion of a pestilence in the 430s BCE, Apollo's first temple at Rome was established in the Flaminian Fields, replacing an older cult site there known as the Apollinaire. During the Second Punic War in 212 BCE, the Ludi Apollinaires, Apollonian Games, were instituted in his honour, on the instruction of a prophecy attributed to one of Marsyas. In the time of Augustus, who considered himself under the special protection of Apollo and was even said to be his son, his worship developed and he became one of the chief gods of Rome. After the Battle of Actium, which was fought near a sanctuary of Apollo, Augustus enlarged Apollo's temple, dedicated a portion of the spoils to him, and instituted quinquennial games in his honour. Is that once every 5 years? I assume so. He also erected a new temple to the god on the Palatine Hill. Sacrifices and prayers on the Palatine to Apollo and Diana formed the culmination of the secular games, held in 17 BCE to celebrate the dawn of a new era. Right, none of that explains this reference here. So, nay, suns which shine as clear as thou when too thou did to Rome appear. It could mean when he appeared as two suns to Rome? Hard to say. Now, Flora, deck thyself in fairest guise. If that ye winds would hear a voice surpassing far Amphion's lyre. Right, Amphion. Who is Amphion? Presumably a mythological figure that was supernaturally skilled with the lyre, I would assume. Amphion, son of Zeus and Antiope, and twin brother of Zephyrus. See Amphion and Zephyrus. Together they are famous for building Thebes. Pausanias recounts an Egyptian legend according to which Amphion employed magic to build the walls of the city. Amphion married Niobe and killed himself after the loss of his wife and children, the Neobids, at the hands of Apollo and Artemis. Goodness me. Diodorus Siculus calls Chloris his daughter, but the other accounts of her parentage identify her father as another Amphion, the ruler of Minion Orchomenus. See below. Amphion, son of King Iasus of Orchomenus, son of Persephone, daughter of Minyas. Persephone. I should know who that was. That was the wife of Hades, I think. The daughter of the god of spring. In ancient Greek mythology and religion, Persephone, also called Cora, or Cora, is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. She became the queen of the underworld after abduction by a marriage to her uncle Hades, the king of the underworld. And it's because she ends up having to spend half her life in the underworld that her mother Demeter mourns for 6 months of the year, which is why we have a autumn and a winter. Supposedly it was eternal spring before then. He became the father of Chloris, wife of Neleus, and Philomac, wife of Peleus. These husbands are sons of Tyro and Poseidon. This Amphion is an obscure character, said to be a king of the minions of Orchomenus in Boeotia. Why would I have looked Boeotia up before? Sometimes Latinized as Boeotia or Boeotia, is one of the regional units of Greece. I don't know why I would have looked that up before, but I'm sure it's somehow relevant to this stream series. I just wanted to check, who was Persephone's Roman equivalent, if any? Proserpina, of course. And that's who we were... that was one of the major gods in the Forgotten City, which we played not that long ago. Of course she was. Because her husband, who was the Roman equivalent of Hades, who was... what was his name? Why could I not think of it? Pluto. Also made an appearance. Where were we? So where were we? A voice surpassing far Amphion's lyre. Okay, that doesn't help. Amphion, son of Hyperasius, son of Peleus, son of Phorbas, from Achaean Pellene, he and his brother Asterius were counted among the Argonauts that sailed to Colchis. In two separate accounts, Hypso was called their mother, while Hippasus was said to be their father. Amphion of Elis, an Achaean warrior who took part in the Trojan War on the side of the Greeks, he was a commander of the Epeans together with Meges and Dracius. Amphion, friend of the celebrated architect Epeius, was killed by Aeneas. Okay, none of those explain the reference to the lyre. Oops. Nope, no idea why it's referring to a lyre. Your stormy chiding stay, let Zephyr only breathe, and with her tresses play, kissing sometimes these purple ports of death. Excuse me. The winds all silent are, and Phoebus in his chair, encircling sea and air, make vanish every star. Night like a drunkard reels beyond the hills to shun his flaming wheels. The fields with flowers are decked in every hue, the clouds bespangle with bright gold their blue. Here is the pleasant place, and everything save her, who all should grace. I do feel like there's more I'm missing here. Anywho, we've looked through it a bit. Let's move on to the riddles. So I assume the last riddle we must have looked at would be 160. Which is, come, learn of me the force of parts alone, and what great things by stirring may be done. I, who was born to neither house nor land, have now vast heaps of wealth at my command, and yet to gain this power I nothing do, but all to others' active hands I owe. I ne'er to civil or to common law was bred, nor taught for fees in noisy courts to plead, yet titles to estates are often tried by me, and I the doubtful case decide, and give such turns to things, that, spite of merit, the rightful heirs do an estate inherit, yet I do to strangers' hands can soon transfer it. There's not a term, no court in Westminster, but there are those can what I say aver, and yet I'm known to have no eloquence, no charms of speech, or even common sense. What appears of me, I must own is smooth. I never huff, but then you'd think I'll soothe. No faith, let sordid, cringing mortals use such sneaking arts, and such mean methods choose, whose oily tongues can sleekly, smoothly glide. I carry all by using my rough side. Then how they storm and damn and swear to see themselves outdone by such a one as me. So choose by such an empty, brainless fool, and gold of all, by such a worthless tool. And then, next time they chance to meet with me, they seek revenge and use me barbarously. I have no sight, but though so blind I be, to show how small advantage 'tis to see To manage those I maked my constant trade, who have eyes full as thick as Argus's head. But that you may at these great wonders guess, one secret truth I freely will confess, though one and of sallow hue my faces, know I'm mightily in the lady's graces. To them I therefore for my name appeal, sure they can use me, who I am can tell. And I believe the solution to that one was a deck of cards. Let's see if I'm right. Oh wait, I've gone too far. Just a second. So we were on 160, weren't we? Ooh, don't want to go too far. Have I gone too far again? Was it dice? I think it might have been. Yes, we were on 155, not 160. I do apologise. Not quite sure how I managed to make that mistake, but I did. And the answer was indeed dice, not a deck of cards. I obviously picked up upon the theme of gambling, but somehow got the overall answer wrong. Moving swiftly on, so we move on to 156. In vain we stretch our thoughts to find subjects to puzzles humankind, when common objects seem to me enigmas past discovery. With my body, small as 'tis, lurk many curious mysteries. Few can my genial atoms trace, or ken the progress of my race. Though numerous beings owe to me themselves and their posterity, of different size and colour too, chameleon-like, of every hue, brown, speckled, yellow, black, or blue. What's yet more strange can make it appear, I ramble almost everywhere, on earth, in air, at random play, and o'er the boundless ocean stray. Though seen by thousands every day, of old a valuable guest, set uppermost at every feast, from whence a proverb I became, for ever shall preserve my name. Some ancient learned mistake tell, I represent the world so well, no livelier symbol can be shown of its duration than my own. With my body's central heat is fixed my ruin too complete, with different strata covered o'er, which must in time the whole devour. Interesting. The only thing I can guess is fire, as in the main fire of a hearth. In vain we stretch our thoughts to find subjects to puzzle humankind, when common objects seem to me enigmas past discovery. That bit doesn't necessarily fit, but it also doesn't not fit, if that makes sense. I'm not sure what sort of answer would fit these lines better. So ignoring that, within my body, small as 'tis, lurk many curious mysteries. Few can my genial atoms trace, or ken the progress of my race. That makes sense, in so much as you could imagine a fire having a genealogy, in the sense that one fire begets another fire. In times gone by, as in from medieval times, during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and so forth, all the way up to the middle of the 20th century, when people were still just about using fire regularly in their homes. I mean, I imagine in some parts of the world people still are using fires regularly in their homes, but you know, in Britain at least, people wouldn't have been that brilliant at fire lighting. What they would have done is they would have always had at least one fire going, and then when they needed to light another one, they would just light it from the existing fire. And so since fires would have been started from other fires, that's where you get the sense of a genealogy, but also it being next to impossible to trace it. Few can my genial atoms trace. Atom in this sense, I think, probably means the indivisible parts. So that is being able to discern exactly what are all the parts that make up a flame, I would guess. Though numerous beings owe to me themselves and their posterity, that would make sense for fire, of different size and colour too, chameleon alike of every hue, brown, speckled, yellow, black or blue. Well, you can't really have a black flame, but you can have black smoke that comes from a flame. You could certainly have a yellow or a blue flame, speckled, sort of, in the sense that you could certainly have a flame that appears to be of multiple shades. Brown, again, doesn't quite fit, but it isn't so outlandish as to be outright dismissed. If it said something like green, for example, we could dismiss a fire immediately. You can have green flame, but it would require specific ions to be present, like if you were doing a flame test. Under normal circumstances, a flame wouldn't be green. When you think about it, brown, yellow, black or blue, these are all colours that an artist might consider when drawing a flame. What's yet more strange, can mark appear, I ramble almost everywhere, on earth, in air, at random play, so that would be a flame flickering, and over the boundless ocean stray. Sort of. There would have been flames on ships. I mean, otherwise how could they have cooked their food? But it's true to say a flame wouldn't naturally travel an ocean. So, possibly I'm wrong, but this isn't necessarily decisively against it either, as I say, because there would be flames on ships, though seen by thousands every day. Indeed, of old a valuable guest sat uppermost at every feast. I don't know what they mean by sat uppermost. Certainly feasts traditionally would have been based around a fire, for obvious reasons. Probably in the centre of a building, like the centre of a roundhouse or something like that. That's not quite the same as saying it's uppermost though. From whence a proverb I became. I'm sure there are many proverbs based around fire. Forever shall preserve my name. Some ancient learned misday tell I represent the world so well. I wouldn't know. I could imagine fire being used as an what's the word? A metaphor for the world, but I don't know. No livelier symbol can be shown of its duration than my own. That's a bit pessimistic, because fires generally go out, but still. Within my body's central heat is fixed my ruin to complete. That makes sense. With different strata covered o'er, which must in time the whole devour. Again, that makes sense in terms of a flame having multiple colours and being in which mutually encompass each other. So let's see, shall we? So we're on 156. Eggs. Oh no. I was well off. Wait, where was I? Here. I think. So one more look. Come learn of me, the force of... Nope. Next one. It is vain we stretch our thoughts to find subjects to puzzle humankind, when common objects seem to me enigmas past discovery. Within my body, small as 'tis, lurk many curious mysteries. Few can my genial atoms trace, or ken the progress of my race. Though numerous beings owe to me themselves and their posterity, of different size and colour too, chameleon-like of every hue, brown, speckled, yellow, black or blue. That, actually, now I think about it, eggs makes a lot more sense with that particular line. Especially speckled, which I somehow missed. Yet what's more strange can make appear I ramble almost everywhere, on earth and air at random play, and o'er the boundless ocean stray. True, birds will cross oceans, though seen by thousands every day. Of old a valuable guest, sat uppermost at every feast. Didn't know that. From whence a proverb I became. Forever, I don't know which proverb. Forever shall preserve my name. Some ancient learned mistake tell I represent the world so well. The idea that the world is an egg somehow rings a bell, but I can't think from where. No livelier symbol can be shown of its duration than my own. I don't follow, unfortunately. Within my body's central heat is fixed my ruin to complete. I don't follow that. Within my body's central heat is fixed my ruin to complete. I suppose you mean if you cook it. With different strata covered o'er, which must in time the whole devour. Again, I don't fully follow that last bit. Anywho, I'm afraid I'm making quite a few mistakes. I think I'm perhaps a little tired, and so I'm going to end it there. I hope you'll forgive me. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be streaming again on Friday, in which I'll be doing more of the Talos Principle. Saturday and Monday are also video game streams, presumably more of the Talos Principle, unless I finish it sooner than expected. And Wednesday will bring us back to poetry and riddles. So, once again, thank you for coming, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Good night.